Today we're going to learn how to balance a check register. And a check register is usually found in the back of a checkbook. A lot of people don't have checkbooks anymore, but if you get a checkbook, it includes what's called a check register. And it's just a way of keeping track of your money. You want to make sure you have enough money in your account to pay for things and stuff. So you keep track of things like deposits. If you remember from our vocabulary page, a deposit is when you're putting money in your account. So if you put any money in your bank account, you would write that on your check register, and that would get added to whatever you had in your account. You would also note any withdrawals. And again, hopefully you remember that vocabulary word. That means when you're taking money out of your account. So you would subtract whatever you took out from what you had in there. And you would also note any transfers. So a transfer is when you move money from one account to another. So if I were to take money out of my checking account and put it in my savings account, I would have to subtract the amount that I moved to savings from the balance that was in my account. And speaking of that word balance, your balance of your bank account tells you how much is actually in your account. And so to balance your check register, I mentioned just a second ago that you add deposits. So since deposit is putting money in your account, whatever you deposited, you add that to the balance. And then everything else besides a deposit gets subtracted. So you're going to subtract any withdrawals that you made and any transfers. And that would include things that you buy. If you buy something, that gets withdrawn from your account. And so here we have an example of a check register. So the person had $236.75 to begin with. Sometimes check registers split up the dollars and cents like that. So that's how much the person had to begin with. And then they deposited some lawn mowing money. So if it's a deposit, it goes in the deposit column. And like I mentioned, any deposits get added. So here they've done $236.75 plus $25. That gave them a new balance of $261.75. Then they went to the beauty salon. This one has a check number, so that means they wrote a check. We always put the date of the transaction and a little description of what the transaction was. And remember, if it's not a deposit, it's a withdrawal. So everything besides deposits goes in the withdrawal column. And remember that if it's a withdrawal, it has to be subtracted. So you pay the beauty salon, which means you have less money now. So they've taken out the $28.29, and we now have $233.46. So now we need to do the rest of these. So it says transfer to savings account. So that money's coming out of our checking account. So originally we had, or not originally, but after the last transaction, we had $233.46. We need to take out $20. Don't forget to always line up your decimal points. So when I subtract those, I get $213.46. So go ahead and write that as our new balance, $213.46. Then the person went to the ATM. We talked about how it's convenient to take money out of the ATM. And so that's going to get subtracted from the balance. So now we need to take $40 away from our balance. I can't take 4 away from 1, so I've got to borrow from the 2. And we end up with $173.46. When you're doing your subtraction for your check register, make sure you always line up your decimal points and be careful for borrowing. And remember, we talked about how banks make their money off of fees. And so to use the ATM, a lot of times they charge you a fee. So again, fees get subtracted from your balance. So if we had 173, we now have 172.46. So our ending balance on this is 172.46. And there is just a little reminder over here to you that if you have a deposit, you add the deposit. And if you have a withdrawal, you subtract the withdrawal. And remember, unless it says deposit, it's a withdrawal. Everything else besides a deposit is a withdrawal. Okay, so here's one for us to try. So the beginning balance was $300. And then it says there's a deposit of $150 and it gives us the date. If it's not a check, you leave the check number blank. So we're not going to put a check number for this first one. We're going to go ahead and put the date, April 1st, and it's a deposit. So you just write down that it's a deposit. Since it's a deposit, it goes in this deposit column. And remember that we add deposits. So I can do this one in my head. 300 plus 150 is going to give us $450. So sometimes it's easy enough math to do in our head. The next transaction is a check. So remember, if it's a check, we want to put the check number. It was check 34. And you usually put who you wrote the check to. So this one was to Harv's Games. And it was for $65.98 on 4/3. So 4/3, it's going to go under withdrawal because it's not a deposit. $65.98, and we have to subtract that from our balance. Okay, so we had $450. We need to subtract $65.98. I know there's not a ton of room there, but we'll have to make it work. Okay, so we can't take 8 away from 0, so we're going to have to borrow. And we have to go quite a ways to borrow. We have to borrow from the 5. 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 9 is 0. 9 minus 5 is 4. We can't take 6 away from 4, so we actually have to borrow again to make that a 14. 14 minus 6 is 8, and 3 minus 0 is 3. So we end up with $384.02. Okay, then we go to the ATM. We take some money out of the ATM. We take $60, and it's on 4/5. It's not a check, so we're going to leave that blank. It was on 4/5. And for an ATM withdrawal, I would just put that ATM withdrawal. It's a withdrawal, so it goes under withdrawal. This one, I feel like we can do in our head. So if you have $384 and you take away $60, that's going to make $324. So $324.02. If we didn't take away any cents, the cents are just going to stay the same. And like we talked about on the last one, if we go to the ATM, they a lot of times are going to charge us a fee. So they charged us $1. It was on the same date of 4/5. And for this one, I would just put ATM fee. It's still a withdrawal because it's coming out. And if we had $324, we're now going to have $323.02 because we took away that $1. And then our last transaction here is a transfer to savings of $20 on 4/7. And I would just put transfer to savings. Because when you look back at your check register, you want to know what you spent the money on or where the money went. So you want to have that description. And it was $20. So if we had $323, we now have $303.02. And you have an assignment today that's very similar to that. So hopefully that made sense to you and you can rewatch that if you need to. But let's go ahead and move over to the left-hand side. We've got a couple of practice problems. Before Isla went to a concert on June 10th, she had a balance of $374.30. She wrote her transaction in her check register. She included all her transactions through the end of the day on June 11th. Based on the transactions, what is the balance now? So remember, we're going to take away this withdrawal and we're going to add that deposit. So first, we need to subtract $374.30 minus $41.70. I can't take 7 away from 3, so I need to borrow. 13 minus 7 is 6. 3 minus 1 is 2. 7 minus 4 is 3. And 3 minus 0 is 3. So after the first one, we've got $332.60. But we're not done because we have to add this deposit. So if it was $332, it's now going to be $352.60. And if you need to work that out to the side, that's fine. But if you can do it in your head, then why not? So the answer to the first one is A. Then we've got this one. It's a lot bigger, but they've filled out a lot of it for us. So the person started with a balance of $587.31, and those two got subtracted. This one got added, so that's why their balance went up at that point. These all got subtracted, and then it stops at that point. So we have to keep going. So first we need to subtract $35. So it was at $892.34. When we subtract $35 from that, we can't take 5 away from 2, so it becomes a 12, and we borrow. 12 minus 5 is 7, 8 minus 3 is 5, 8 minus 0 is 8, so it's down to $857.34. Then we have to add $25. So $25 deposit gets added. This would be 6 plus 2 is 8. So we're up to $882.34. And then we have 2 more withdrawals. So $882.34 minus $56.33. We have to borrow here. So we get $826.01. And then we have one more subtraction problem, minus $98.45. Can't take 5 away from 1, so we have to borrow. Can't borrow from the 0, so we have to go all the way to the 6. 11 minus 5 is 6. 9 minus 4 is 5. We can't take 8 away from 5, so we have to borrow again from this 2. 15 minus 8 is 7. Can't take 9 away from 1, so a lot of borrowing in this problem. That becomes a 7. 11 minus 9 is 2. 7 minus 0 is 7. So we end up with $727.56, which is answer choice B. Okay, so just remember, unless it says it's a deposit, it's a withdrawal. Deposits get added, withdrawals get subtracted. I hope that's helpful, and good luck on your assignment.